If you crave the unknown, but fear the dark, then Delphi. After Dawn is your sanctuary. As the first light of dawn breaks through the night, we embark on a journey into the mysteries that chill the spine. I'm your host, Jason King, and together, we'll explore the stories that lurk in the shadows. Each episode, we unravel chilling tales of unsolved crimes, police corruption, and heart-wrenching disappearances. Imagine a world where over 600,000 people vanished last year alone in the U.S., leaving behind only questions and heartache. Violent crime is on the rise, and the shadows grow longer each day. By joining us, you become a beacon for the voiceless, a light in the darkness. Together, we'll shine a light on society's darkest corners, uncovering the truths that hide in plain sight. From the eerie silence of abandoned buildings to the bustling streets where secrets are whispered, we leave no stone unturned. Tune in to Delphi After Dawn, where understanding is just a story away. Join us and let the journey begin. As we delve deeper, remember that every story has a heartbeat, a pulse that connects us all. We navigate through the labyrinth of human experience, seeking answers and shedding light on the unknown. So prepare yourself for a journey like no other, where every revelation brings us closer to the truth. Delphi. After Dawn is more than just a podcast. It's a community of seekers, united by curiosity and compassion. Together, we can make a difference, one story at a time. Join us and let the journey begin anew. In the shadows of the city, where secrets are commodities and trust is a luxury, one man delves into the minds of the monstrous. Welcome to the world of Jason King, a detective with a mind as sharp as a scalpel and a heart as resilient as steel. Beneath the ordinary scenes of daily life, grim tales of notorious serial killers lurk. Each one, unique in their madness, leaves behind a chilling legacy of victims and unsolvable puzzles. But the twisted minds of these murderers never elude Jason King. With every episode, the stakes rise. Every grim detail, each hideous crime, King peels back layer by layer. In a world where evil is the norm and horror is the narrative, Jason King remains steadfast. His mission? To uncover the dark consciousness of terror. His promise? Justice. This is Jason King's world, where crime is not just confronted, but comprehended. Dive deep into the chilling tales of serial killers with Jason King. This video is for educational entertainment and documentary purposes. Viewer discretion is highly advised.
There's nothing special about being American. None of you can define for me what an American is.
I am the nation. I was born on July 4th, 1776, and the Declaration of Independence is my birth certificate. The bloodlines of the world run in my veins because I offered freedom to the oppressed. I am many things and many people. I am the nation. I'm 200 million living souls and the ghost of millions who have lived and died for me. I'm Nathan Hale and Paul Revere. I stood at Lexington and fired the shot heard round the world. I'm Washington, Jefferson, Patrick Henry. I'm John Paul Jones, the Green Mountain Boys, Davy Crockett. I'm Lee.
Tonight, growing calls for answers in the death of Fort Hood soldier Private Ana Fernanda Basaldua Ruiz and allegations that she was sexually harassed on base before she died.
This is a pain that we never experienced before. My family is destroyed, to say the least.
The 20-year-old joined the Army in 2021 in hopes of having a successful career in the military.
Y ella cree que entrando al ejército en los Estados Unidos iba a lograr muchos de sus sueños.
But that all came to an abrupt end last week when her body was found. Family members in Mexico stunned by her sudden death. Their grief interrupted by anger, her family calling for an investigation into what they say was a troubling experience in the Army.
She shared some details of she having a hard time during these last weeks.
Her mother, Alejandra Ruiz, telling Telemundo her daughter had said she'd been sexually harassed on base by a superior.
Mi hija está conmigo. Mi hija no es un recuerdo. Mi hija está en un presente.
The Army's Criminal Investigation Division reporting no foul play is suspected in her death, but an official cause hasn't been released, while allegations that she was sexually harassed are under investigation.
CID is currently investigating these allegations, and they will investigate these allegations thoroughly. Let me be clear, we do not tolerate harassment of any type. Harassment of any type is contrary to the Army values.
The soldier's death once again spotlighting Fort Hood's handling of sexual harassment allegations. First drawing scrutiny after the murder of Army Specialist Vanessa Guillen, another Latina Fort Hood soldier who filed a similar report before she was brutally killed. Her death leading to the I Am Vanessa Guillen Act in 2021, a law criminalizing sexual harassment under the Uniform Code of Military Justice. At least 14 leaders from Fort Hood were relieved of duty or suspended from their positions following the case. A report issued by RAND, a federally funded research group, found that Army women at Fort Hood, Fort Bliss, and several other bases face total sexual assault risk that is higher than the risk faced by the average woman in the Army.
And unfortunately, I think that there has been a culture that's been allowed to fester of allowing men to try to take advantage and harass women that are in the military.
Do you think anything changed after Vanessa Guillen's case?
The Vanessa Guillen Act was passed, and now we're just hoping that it's implemented and exercised to the full extent of the law.
As for Basaldua Ruiz's family, they'll continue to wait for answers as to what happened to the soldier they loved so much.
She wanted to travel the world. She loved music. She loved to dance. I just want everybody to not let my niece's name fade, to keep her name alive until we realize what really happened.
And Valerie Castro joins us now. Valerie, you listened to that civil rights group you spoke with. You listened to the family. It seems like a lot of people are saying, hey, maybe there should be some sort of outside independent investigation. Could that happen here?
Allison Lulac, the group that you heard from in that case, says they want the FBI to jump on this case and sort out exactly how she died. But they also say more needs to be done to change the culture at Fort Hood surrounding sexual harassment. They say there was some awareness that came out as a result of the Vanessa Guillen case 3 years ago, but they say clearly there is more work that needs to be done.
Gold Star mother is looking for official answers about her son's death at Fort Hood in November.
Private First Class Logan Costello joins a growing list of deaths at an Army post under intense scrutiny. According to Fort Hood, they have dealt with 165 deaths since 2016. Among the causes of death are 7 homicides. 5 happened this year. Fort Hood has also handled 70 suicides in 4 years, which brings us back to Logan Costello.
His mother spoke to Eyewitness News reporter Marvin Hurst today. She says the death phenomenon at this Army post must end.
To reflect on the life of Logan Michael Costello yields images of energy and achievement.
He excelled at everything. Everyone loved him.
The Ohio native was a football captain and class president who saw his path for the future in the United States Army. His first duty station was Fort Hood, and in just a 5-month span, it became the beginning of the end.
And we learned after the fact that he had been experiencing depression, and he went to his command seeking help and reported that he was having suicidal thoughts.
Married for just 2 months, showing no signs of mental health crisis, he spoke with his mother, Patty Troyan, about Thanksgiving 2019.
One of the last things he said to me was, "Mom, this is going to be the best Thanksgiving ever." And then 2 days later, he was dead.
November 20th, 2019 became his family's day of devastation.
His front door was bolted from the inside, and he hung himself in the closet, over the closet door, and shut himself in the closet and sat down.
Fort Hood flew his family in for a memorial. But since that time, his mother, who is a prison social worker who works with suicidal inmates every day, keeps waiting on official documentation about her son's death.
I have an unofficial death certificate. I would like the official death certificate, the complete investigation packet, the autopsy report, and also his medical records.
Fort Hood says Logan's suicide was handled by the Killeen Police Department, and that's where she can get the investigative report. The Justice of the Peace, they say, did not order an autopsy.
I remember every day that I'm never going to speak to him again.
Nearly 10 months after that day, a grieving mother may finally find out what happened to her Logan.
Knowing that he took his own life, and all he had to do was stand up, and he'd be here. So I can't imagine the feelings of desperation that he had. And Fort Hood need to do better.
Marvin Hurst, KENS 5, Eyewitness News.
Our top story tonight, a big shakeup at Fort Hood. The commander of the Army post has been removed from his position in the wake of a series of tragic incidents, including the murder of Army Specialist Vanessa Guillen of Houston. And tonight, the family of another soldier says they do not buy the Army's story about what happened to their loved one. Grace White explains.
They tell us that he was a go-getter. He's aggressive. He's so highly decorated.
23-year-old Sergeant Elder Fernandez was born in Cape Verde off the west coast of Africa and from a military family.
He recently re-enlisted until 2024 because he loves the Army.
His cousin, Mariana Shorter, who spent 24 years in the Army, including time at Fort Hood, says the family is in disbelief. They were told he died by suicide off post.
Was it the sexual harassment? Was it the bullying? Was it the hazing?
In May, Fernandez reported someone grabbed his rear end. The Army moved him to a different unit, but said they also noticed behavioral changes. Fernandez was admitted to the hospital in early August and was last seen on the 17th, the day he was released. A week later, he was found dead.
We were truly hoping for a different result in reuniting Sergeant Fernandez with his family.
But just 2 days later, the Army announced the case was closed, saying the person accused of the sexual assault passed a polygraph and there were no other witnesses.
They told us that it was an ongoing investigation and it would be a timely investigation.
Fernandez is now the 10th soldier stationed at Fort Hood found dead since March, including Houston soldier Vanessa Guillen.
And in this case, and in so many other cases, we're feeling like these soldiers are being let down.
Today, Fernandez's body was flown back home to Brockton, Massachusetts. His family wants an independent autopsy. Meantime, at Fort Hood, a civilian committee has arrived to investigate the claims of sexual harassment these cases have brought to light. Mia?
New details are coming in tonight about missing Fort Hood soldier Sergeant Elder Fernandez. Army officials say he was last seen Monday in Killeen. His mother says he was recently discharged from Darnall Hospital, but the reason that he was there remains unclear. 6 News reporter Jasmine Caldwell live near Fort Hood with more. Jasmine?
Well, hey, Leslie, this information that I just got moments ago, it's new in the case. It says Fort Hood has confirmed that an open investigation of sexual contact involving the missing soldier Fernandez is the focus of a growing search. Now, we just learned that information just moments ago. Abuse of sexual contact involving this case has just been confirmed by Fort Hood. I spoke to his mother earlier today about him going missing. Take a listen to what she had to say.
Tonight, help is needed to find Sergeant Elder Fernandez. Killeen police say he was last seen by his staff sergeant Monday afternoon when he was dropped off at his home in the 2700 block of Woodlands Drive. Fernandez's mother, Eileen, flew in from Boston to look for her son. She says it's not like him to up and disappear.
We've been talking since last Tuesday, and he's been in the hospital since last Tuesday, and we've been talking every single day for 2 or 3 times a day, and for him to get out of the hospital and nowhere to be found, it's concern, it's a worry, it's a nightmare right now.
It's unclear why Fernandez was admitted into the hospital. Today, the Army Criminal Investigation Division released a statement saying Fernandez may have left Fort Hood on his own accord, following information gathered from other soldiers. They say his vehicle was found on post in his unit's parking lot. His mother says recently he seemed unhappy.
Lately, in the last 2 months or 3 months, elders started not being happy in the Army.
Fernandez was last seen wearing black Army PT shorts, a T-shirt, and red athletic shoes. Fort Hood say they've completed a search of the entire division area, which includes motor pools, parking lots, and the headquarters building. They've even put out a bolo for the soldier. Now, Texas EquiSearch, the same group who helped find the remains of Vanessa Guillen back in June, are joining the effort of Fort Hood and Killeen police in an effort his mother is hoping is not in vain.
They've been telling me they have people in the field right now. They telling me they doing search, they doing this, they doing that. But for me, it's just nothing is fast enough until they can find my son, Elder Fernandez.
Now, I also learned that Natalie Kawam, the same attorney who helped missing Fort Hood soldier Vanessa Guillen and her family, well, Kawam is going to be representing Fernandez and his family on this case. Reporting live in Killeen, Jasmine Caldwell, 6 News.
All right, thanks, Jasmine. And I did want to explain a little bit more about what Jasmine had been talking about, this update we received just about 5 minutes ago from Fort Hood, 1st Cavalry Division's Public Affairs Office. It says that Sergeant Fernandez is in an open investigation of abuse, sexual contact involving him. The chain of command takes all of the sexual investigation, harassment, and assaults investigations seriously. The unit sexual assault response coordinator has been working closely with Sergeant Fernandez, ensuring he's aware of his reporting, care, and victim advocacy rights and options. He apparently had been recently transferred from another unit so that it could be made sure he received proper care and that there would be no reprisals for any actions that he took. So definitely a development in this case. We will continue to keep you updated as more comes into us.
This whole thing is just dirty. I mean, it's dirty, dirty, dirty.
Around 10:30 in the morning on May 18th, Harker Heights police received a call
About a man in distress on the side of the road.
Around that same time, the fire department got a call. About 5 miles away, a Jeep was burning in a wooded area. That man in distress identified as Fort Hood soldier Private First Class Brandon Rosecrans. He was shot 4 times and died just days short of his 28th birthday.
It's just killed us all. It's killed it's like it's just stopped us all in time.
His father, Thomas Berg, says Rosecrans had just bought the Jeep.
They used my son's phone after they killed him to ask his friends for money for gas, and they used that to buy the gas to burn his car.
Police arrested 2 people. 28-year-old Brandon Oliveras was recently charged with murder. His girlfriend, Estrita, or Star Falcon, is facing 2 charges for using the Jeep and hindering prosecution.
These 2 people had befriended my son, and the week before had been pretty much leeching off my son.
2 weeks prior to his death, Rosecrans told a friend he was robbed at gunpoint by 4 people who lived off post. It appears Oliveris and Falcon were not involved. Rosecrans' father says a close friend had recently died and he was away from loved ones.
Brandon was in a bad situation where that young man had died. He was looking for friends and he found the wrong ones.
As far as possessions go, Burke says he has nothing left of his son. From his iPad to his guns, someone took it all.
We know Brandon had a 9mm that's missing. He was also shot with a 9mm.
In an affidavit, police wrote that Oliveris told them several stories about what happened to Rosecrans, but right now they don't believe any of it is true. Falcon told police Oliveris had been discussing the sale of guns and a possible robbery, saying he wanted more than Rosecrans was willing to give. She said she made fun of Oliveris for being scared to kill Rosecrans.
Unfortunately, we will probably never have the real answer, the real truth, but we know that our son was only trying to be friends with someone.
Shannon Ryan, Fox 7 Austin News.
Congress is launching an investigation into the recent deaths at Fort Hood in Texas. A letter was sent to Army Secretary Ryan McCarthy requesting documents and information on the deaths. According to the letter, the subcommittees will look at whether the deaths are symptomatic of problems with the chain of command. 28 soldiers stationed at the U.S. Army base have died this year. One of the more high-profile deaths involved Vanessa Guillen. Federal officials say she was murdered by a fellow soldier back in April.
Is why he started shooting. For dozens of unarmed soldiers at a Fort Hood medical processing center, it was an afternoon of horror. At about 1:30 Thursday, military officials say 39-year-old Army Major Nadal Malik Hassan walked into a waiting room and opened fire with 2 non-military handguns, randomly shooting soldiers in one building, then walking into an adjacent building and shooting again.
The major who did it kept reloading clip after clip pretty much and just was pretty relentless.
In all, 13 people were killed and at least 30 injured, a toll that could have been even higher, but for the actions of a female police officer among the first to respond to the shooting.
Female officer is alive, just out of surgery and in stable condition. She is believed to be the first responder who shot the suspect.
The suspect was shot at least 4 times by the officer, a civilian employed by the Department of the Army. As police and ambulances rushed to the scene, officials say soldiers, some victims themselves, tore their uniforms to make bandages to treat the wounded.
We put a great investment in soldiers' first aid, in taking care of each other. I'm sure this could have been much worse.
In the chaos that followed the shooting rampage, authorities locked down the sprawling Army post for more than 5 hours.
Normally he would call me to pick him up, but when I called back, his phone just busy.
Veronica Flores heard of the shootings and couldn't reach her soldier fiancé. She drove 3 hours, hoping to find him.
I didn't know what was going on. I was very, very scared and nervous, and I just wanted to know if he was all right and everybody else around him.
Fort Hood, Texas, one of the world's largest military bases, a city of soldiers, a symbol of American strength. But beneath its proud reputation, a troubling reality emerged, a place where the protectors themselves were no longer safe. In 2020, 28 Fort Hood soldiers died, not in combat, and not all in the same way, but all under mysterious and often violent circumstances. Some was self-inflicted, some was murder, and some was weird accidents. Each loss raised urgent questions about safety, leadership, and a system that seemed unable or unwilling to protect its own. These deaths shattered trust, not just within military families, but across the nation. The call for truth and accountability grew louder as the public demanded to know what was really happening at Fort Hood. early 2020 brought a steady drumbeat of tragedy. Soldiers found dead, families left in the dark, and a base gripped by fear. Official silence and slow investigations fueled suspicion as the community realized these were not isolated incidents. As spring unfolded, disappearances and violent deaths mounted. Brandon Rosecrans, Gregory Morales, and most notably, Vanessa Guillén. Each case exposed failures in leadership and a system that too often dismissed or misclassified the dangers within its own ranks. Vanessa Guillén's murder ignited national outrage, revealing deep-rooted issues of abuse and neglect at Fort Hood. Public pressure forced the Army to confront its failures. But the question remained, would real change finally come, or would the cycle of tragedy continue? As summer faded into autumn, the crisis at Fort Hood showed no signs of abating. The grim tally of soldier deaths continued to rise, each new incident deepening the sense of anguish and outrage. Sergeant Elder Fernandez, who had previously reported sexual abuse, went missing in mid-August. His disappearance sparked another frantic search. Tragically, his body was found hanging from a tree about 25 miles from the base a week later. His death was ruled a suicide. His case further amplified concerns about the treatment of soldiers who report sexual misconduct and the mental health support available to them. It felt like a devastating echo of Vanessa Guillén's story. The sheer number of deaths was now impossible to ignore, even for those who had previously dismissed the concerns. By September, the count was well into the 20s. Each death represented a unique individual, a shattered family, and a fresh wave of questions for the Army. Were these deaths connected? Was there a failure of leadership? Was the environment at Fort Hood itself somehow toxic? The official explanations, often citing suicide, accident, or homicide unrelated to Army service, did little to quell the growing public suspicion that something was fundamentally broken at the Great Place. The pattern was too persistent, too tragic. Investigations into the individual deaths crawled along. Families often complained about a lack of communication from Army CID and local law enforcement. They felt left in the dark, struggling to piece together what happened to their loved ones. This information vacuum fueled further speculation and mistrust. Some families hired private investigators. Others turned to activists and the media to amplify their calls for justice. The constant stream of negative headlines kept Fort Hood in the national spotlight, but not for its military prowess. Instead, it became synonymous with a crisis of safety and leadership. The Army leadership, facing intense scrutiny, began to take more visible, if belated, action. High-ranking officials visited the base. Town halls were held. Promises were made to improve conditions and address the corrosive elements that had allowed such tragedies to multiply. Yet, even as these initiatives were announced, the deaths continued. In November, Specialist Francisco Gilberto Hernandez Vargas was found dead in Stillhouse Hollow Lake after a boating incident. His death was ruled an accidental drowning. While perhaps not nefarious, it added to the overwhelming sense of loss that permeated Fort Hood throughout that devastating autumn. In 2020, 28 soldiers connected to Fort Hood died. An unprecedented tragedy. The Army's own review revealed deep systemic failures in leadership and a climate permissive of abuse. Sweeping reforms followed, but for families, the pain lingers. The crisis was finally acknowledged, but the shadow over Fort Hood remains. When deaths began to surface at Fort Hood in 2020, the Army responded with condolences and promises of investigation. Each tragedy was framed as an isolated incident, but as the numbers grew, so did questions. The official story began to fray under the weight of so much tragedy. When you look at the numbers, the breakdown of the 28 deaths at Fort Hood in 2020 is, honestly, chilling. The Army eventually provided official causes for most. These categories themselves tell a grim story. There were suicides. There were homicides. There were accidents. And for some, the cause remained undetermined for extended periods, prolonging the agony for families. Each category raises its own set of painful questions. Why so many suicides? Who was responsible for the homicides? What kinds of accidents were happening with such frequency on a military post far from a combat zone? The data itself cried out for deeper examination. The process for determining a soldier's cause of death is complex. It involves military, medical examiners, CID agents, and sometimes civilian law enforcement agencies, especially if the death occurs off-post. Autopsies are performed, evidence is collected, interviews are conducted. But this process, while aiming for thoroughness, was often perceived by grieving families as slow and lacking transparency. They questioned if every angle was truly being explored, especially when the initial findings didn't align with what they knew about their loved ones. The official pronouncements, delivered with bureaucratic finality, sometimes felt like a closing of the book, rather than a true uncovering of all facts. The homicide cases were particularly alarming. Specialist Vanessa Guillen's murder was a brutal awakening for many. Specialist Freddie Dela Cruz Jr. and Private First Class Brandon Rosecrans were also among those whose deaths were ruled homicides. Investigators had to determine if the perpetrators were fellow soldiers or civilians. They had to track down leads, often in communities surrounding the vast base. The resolution of these cases was critical, not just for justice, but for the safety and security of all soldiers at Fort Hood. Each unsolved or slowly progressing homicide investigation added to the climate of fear and mistrust. Then there were the suicides. Sergeant Elder Fernandez's death, after he reported sexual abuse, highlighted the immense pressure some soldiers faced. The Army has long struggled with suicide within its ranks, but the concentration of such deaths at Fort Hood raised specific concerns about the command climate, mental health support, and the effectiveness of prevention programs on this particular base. Were soldiers getting the help they needed? Or were they being failed by a system that was either overwhelmed or, worse, indifferent to their struggles? The official label of suicide often left families wondering if something or someone had pushed their loved one to that desperate point. The official story presented by the Army often clashed with the experiences and beliefs of the grieving families. These families, shattered by loss, found themselves battling for information, for transparency, for what they felt was the whole truth. The case of Private Gregory Morales was a stark example. He went missing in August 2019. The Army initially declared him a deserter. His family vehemently disputed this. 10 months later, his skeletal remains were found. His death was then investigated as a homicide. This initial incorrect classification, his family argued, delayed the search and investigation, costing crucial time. It was a deep crack in the official narrative. Many families reported a profound lack of communication from Army CID and Fort Hood leadership. They described phone calls not returned, questions unanswered, and a general sense of being kept in the dark. This information vacuum was agonizing. It bred suspicion. It led families to believe that perhaps the Army wasn't telling them everything. Or worse, that there might be an effort to obscure embarrassing or incriminating details. The pain of their loss was compounded by the frustration of feeling unheard, of feeling like their loved one's death was not being treated with the urgency or thoroughness it deserved. In some instances, official statements seemed to shift over time, or different branches of the investigation appeared to offer conflicting details. This only served to deepen the mistrust. For example, initial reports about a soldier's death might suggest an accident, only for later, scant details to hint at something else, or for the investigation to drag on for months without a clear conclusion. This lack of consistency made it difficult for families to find closure. It fueled the perception that the official story was not a fixed account of facts, but a fluid narrative, perhaps shaped by concerns other than the unvarnished truth. This is where lawyers, activists, and private investigators often stepped in. Hired by desperate families, they began to scrutinize the official accounts. They filed Freedom of Information Act requests. They conducted their own interviews. They highlighted inconsistencies and demanded further action from the military. Natalie Kawam, the attorney for the Guillen family, became a prominent voice, challenging the Army's handling of Vanessa's disappearance and death. These advocates became crucial in pushing for accountability and forcing the cracks in the official narrative wider, exposing the unanswered questions to public view. The U.S. Army Criminal Investigation Command, known as CID, bore the primary responsibility for investigating many of the deaths at Fort Hood. Their agents are tasked with uncovering the truth behind serious incidents, from homicide to sexual assault to complex fraud within the Army. It is a difficult, often thankless job. CID agents operate under immense pressure, particularly in high-profile situations like the one unfolding at Fort Hood. They are expected to be thorough, impartial, and swift. But the sheer volume of cases, coupled with their sensitivity, placed an extraordinary burden on the CID agents assigned to the base. However, as the crisis deepened, CID itself came under intense criticism. Families repeatedly voiced frustration with what they perceived as slow progress, poor communication, and a lack of empathy from investigators. In the crucial early days of Vanessa Guillen's disappearance, her family felt their concerns were dismissed. They believed CID was not moving quickly enough, not taking the possibility of foul play seriously enough. Similar complaints echoed from other families who felt their questions were met with silence or bureaucratic runaround. The trust between the investigators and the community they served was eroding rapidly. The Fort Hood Independent Review Committee, or FHIRC, report, released in December 2020, validated many of these criticisms. The report found significant issues with the Fort Hood CID office. It described agents as overworked, inexperienced, and under-resourced. It highlighted a reactive approach to investigations rather than a proactive one. Specifically, the report noted that only 31% of CID agents at Fort Hood had more than 2 years of investigative experience. This lack of experience, the committee concluded, impacted the quality and timeliness of investigations, particularly concerning sex crimes and deaths. This was a damning assessment from an Army-appointed panel. Investigating crimes within the military presents unique challenges. There's a complex interplay of military law and civilian law, especially when incidents involve both soldiers and civilians or occur off post. There can be inherent conflicts of interest, or at least the perception of them, when an organization is essentially investigating itself. The hierarchical nature of the military can also make it difficult for junior soldiers to come forward with information. These systemic factors, combined with the specific shortcomings identified at the Fort Hood CID office, created a perfect storm where the burden of proof often felt insurmountable, and the burden of trust became too heavy to bear for many. The deaths at Fort Hood forced the Army to confront a painful truth. These were not isolated incidents, but signs of systemic failure. The Farsi report made it official. Leadership failures and a permissive command climate allowed tragedy to multiply. 14 leaders were fired, reforms promised. But for many, questions and pain remain. The Army acknowledged a sick forest, but not every diseased tree. In 2020, 28 soldiers died at Fort Hood. Official explanations felt too simple, leaving families and the public with more questions than answers. The case of specialist Vanessa Guillen shattered trust, fueling suspicion and fear. Many wondered, were these tragedies isolated or signs of something far more troubling at Fort Hood? As the crisis deepened, suspicion fell on Army leadership at Fort Hood. Theories of a cover-up spread online and among grieving families, questioning if evidence was suppressed and deaths misclassified. The initial labeling of Private Gregory Morales as a deserter, only for his death to be ruled a homicide, fueled these fears. Trust was eroded, and whispers of deception grew louder. As trust in official explanations faded, rumors of organized crime and shadowy groups at Fort Hood grew. Stories of gangs, human trafficking, and even cults spread, blurring the line between fact and fear. Young, isolated soldiers seemed especially vulnerable, fueling public anxiety. In the absence of answers, speculation thrived, filling the void with unsettling possibilities. "28 soldiers died at Fort Hood in a single year. Was it coincidence or something more sinister? Was there a pattern, a hidden threat, or even a serial killer? Some believed a toxic culture enabled violence, while others saw a web of conspiracies. The urge to connect these tragedies, to find meaning in the chaos, haunted everyone at Fort Hood. Fort Hood, like many military bases, is a closed, heavily guarded world. Its secrecy, meant for security, can breed suspicion, especially when tragedies occur and answers are slow to come. In this environment, conspiracy theories flourish, fueled by past scandals, social media, and a sense of powerlessness. For many, these theories become a way to demand truth and accountability. Fort Hood, its motto, "The Great Place," once stood for pride and strength. But beneath the surface, darker currents stirred. The vastness that inspired awe also hid problems. Cries for help lost in the shadows. In 2020, tragedy shattered the image, revealing a place in crisis, far from the ideal it claimed to be. The Fort Hood Independent Review Committee report, released in 2020, revealed a crisis of leadership and toxic command climate. High turnover, lack of accountability, and toxic leadership eroded trust and discipline. The consequences were devastating, leading to tragedy and unprecedented dismissals of senior leaders. Rebuilding trust at Fort Hood and across the Army would require a deep cultural shift. The FHIRC report called Fort Hood a permissive environment for sexual harassment and assault, a systemic problem, not just a few bad actors. Victims felt unsupported. Perpetrators acted with impunity, and trust unraveled. Changing this toxic culture would require more than policies. It demanded a fundamental shift in attitudes, accountability, and leadership. Fort Hood's history is marked by tragedy. The 2009 and 2014 shootings, along with other violent incidents, cast long shadows over the base. These events raise questions about internal threats, mental health, and whether reforms truly addressed deeper systemic issues. The pattern of crisis at Fort Hood proved hard to ignore. Behind the statistics are individual soldiers, young, hopeful, and far from home. The transition to military life is intense, filled with stress, isolation, and relentless expectations. For some, the greatest battles are not overseas, but within the gates of their own base. These are lives, not numbers. The tragedies at Fort Hood sent shockwaves far beyond Texas. But these issues, sexual harassment, leadership failures, violence, were not unique to one base. Fort Hood became a stark warning, a microcosm of challenges simmering across the U.S. military. Its failures revealed the urgent need for reform, not just at one post, but throughout the armed forces. Why did Fort Hood become ground zero in 2020? Its massive size, relentless operational tempo, and leadership failures created a perfect storm. The tragic case of Specialist Vanessa Guillen and her family's fight for justice exposed deep systemic issues, galvanizing a national reckoning. Without her story, the crisis at Fort Hood might have remained hidden much longer. The tragedy at Fort Hood and Vanessa Guillen's case sparked a national reckoning. Public outcry and the I Am Vanessa Guillen movement forced the Army and lawmakers to act. Landmark reforms followed, including the I Am Vanessa Guillen Act, new protocols, and a renewed focus on accountability, planting the seeds of lasting change. The events of 2020 left deep scars, etched in families, soldiers, and the public's trust. Rebuilding that trust takes more than policy. It demands lasting change, vigilance, and accountability. The shadow of Fort Hood is long, but our responsibility is clear: to honor the fallen and ensure every service member is valued and protected. "28 soldiers lost in a single year at Fort Hood on American soil, not in combat, raised urgent questions. The Army's initial explanations fell apart as families demanded answers. A scathing review exposed systemic failures and leadership breakdowns. Yet, for many, the truth remains elusive. The shadows of 2020 still stretch long over Fort Hood, a reminder of lives lost and questions left unresolved. Fort Hood's tragedy still echoes, a breach of trust between a nation and its defenders. 38 lives lost, all together, families shattered, and a military community forever changed. The I Am Vanessa Guillen movement became a global call for justice and reform. Fort Hood reminds us: vigilance, accountability, and care for our soldiers must never be taken for granted. The agony of Fort Hood demands real, lasting change. The firings, new laws, and reforms are just the beginning. Congress, the media, and advocacy groups like me and others must keep up the pressure for accountability. I've always had a lot of respect for people who serve in the military and risk their lives to fight for this country. This is my grandfather. He served in the United States Air Force, and witnessed and endured a lot of things. He is no longer here, and I miss him greatly. We owe it to those lost to make sure the military is safe for all who serve, men and women, and that nobody ever forgets these fallen heroes. In a shadowy underworld of crime, where the ordinary meets the extraordinary, you've been journeying with me, Jason King. We've dissected the minds of some of the most notorious serial killers, peeling back the layers of their darkest secrets. Every shadowy corner we've turned, every chilling confession we've analyzed, has been a step deeper into the abyss. But remember, the abyss also gazes back. So, brace yourself as we prepare to dive even deeper. Next time, we'll unravel a tale so twisted it will make your spine tingle with anticipation. An enigma so intricate it will have you questioning everything you thought you knew. Until then, keep your eyes open and your mind sharp. This is Jason King, signing off.